Royal Portrush, a club that we are intricately connected with, a club that we've worked with for quite a few years now. And we've held off on creating this film. We're here for the 2025 Open.
153rd Open Championship. Doesn't feel that long ago since it was last played there. 2019, Shane Lowry. I still think that Saturday goes down as, one of the great rounds of championship golf. So it's exciting to look at the golf course. In 2019, I hadn't played there. I'd played golf in Northern Ireland really. And coming to it now, I'm feeling like, I've got a reasonable read on it as a golf course. But whenever they play these championships and when they play them at the distance they do, they're essentially very slightly different golf courses, I think.
It's obviously quite a storied golf club. Takes its origins back to like 1888, which is old. I mean, that's before the great English golf boom. It's really early in the sort of pickup of golf in the UK and Ireland.
The Dunluce links, the two courses at Royal Portrush, the Valley and the Dunluce. But the Dunluce links is really, a truly exceptional links course. It's not just one of, the famous British links. It genuinely is absolutely exceptional. I mean, I think the thing you got to remember with the Dunluce links is, as a golf course, it's a lot more golden age than many of the other Open Championship venues that are ancient out and back links that would, largely have been built pre-1900. Colt was employed by the club, I think, in the late 20s. By then, he would have been at the absolute peak of his power. Like, that would have been, he's done everything in his career, and he was commissioned by the club to essentially reimagine Portrush as a 36-hole complex and get the most from the land. And you can see when he does that he tears the rule book up with perhaps what was inherited, and that's where you get these two exceptional layouts. The Dunluce in particular, the routing there is just an absolute masterclass in terms of taking you to the points of most drama. The green sites are absolutely exquisite. And I think Darwin very quickly writes about it. Bernard Darwin sort of says that in the Dunluce Course, Harry Colt has thereby built himself a monument more enduring than brass. This was his crowning achievement.
Yeah, it's interesting because the evolution of the links started as a 9-hole course, got extended by Old Tom to 18 on nowhere near the land that they operate on now. The original links was much deeper into the town, and then when Old Tom extended it to 18, they also had a ladies course there. It kind of went out to roughly where the second is now, and it cut straight across to where the 15th is now. That kind of space of land, so they didn't have anything beyond 3, 4, 5, bringing it all the way back to kind of, they had a little bit of the Valley course, but again, none of that stuff that's on the east of the course. And then when Harry Colt came in and they got that extra land, set in heavy, heavy dunes, some of the most dramatic dunes I've ever seen.
Let's talk about the land, because I think there are no great golf courses built on bad land. It just is impossible. So as a raw ingredient when you're building any course, the land is probably the biggest determinant of success. And the land at Portrush you almost can't miss. It's always going to be a very good golf course. The work of Colt and everyone else throughout its history will come on to. But the land is absolutely exceptional. You've got those kind of the cliffs over white rocks and the look out to the Skerries. You've got huge elevation change, which again, how that's incorporated into the holes we'll come on to. But you've got these huge dunes as well, so there's a drama to the golf course that's pretty much unmatched. I'm not sure I can think of a more dramatic dunescape on an Open Championship course. It certainly has more drama than anything really.
It's interesting for anyone who's visiting Royal Portrush, if they get a chance to look over at the Skerries, which is the island formation which is in the distance. If you're above the course, which is the main road in, and you can look down on the course past the Rosses, which is a beautiful dormy house they've got there, and you can see the Skerries in the distance, and it's probably a mile and a half long strip of land which sits on its own beyond the coastline. And Royal Portrush can pretty much thank that tiny little slither of land for everything it's got, because it takes all the heat off that Atlantic Ocean So it's protecting the dune structure, and they never had significant sea encroachment because it's all protected. All the really heavy stuff is protected by the skerries. So by the time it gets to Royal Portrush, which is probably another mile through the coast onto the beach, it's all simmered down. So we don't have that coastal erosion. And of course, on that side, on that north side of the course, you've got that huge dune structure which protects the 7th hole, the one Martin Ebert put in for the 2019 Open. But that huge dune structure which protects the whole course, and it's just the most gorgeous little bit of land that you can get.
I think a lot will be talked about during the championship of the 16th, Calamity, and that being an exceptionally dramatic hole. But that's not the only case, and I think when you look at the landscape that is dramatic, the way that's incorporated into the golf holes is really interesting. There's not many great links courses that have the same elevation change within the holes. So I think about one, it looks flatter on TV. When you are there, that is a huge climb up to that first green that creates a very kind of interesting challenge to set the round. When you think about the 5th that cascades down, you think about the 15th that plays up and over, you think about Featherbed, the par 3 that drops down into that bowl that it shares with the 17th green, Purgatory. There's a huge amount of elevation change within the holes as well that's used, and I think that's what kind of lifts it, gives it almost like another dimension in that sense.
I think it's a fabulous layout in terms of it asks pretty much every question. You've got to be good with a driver. There's dogleg lefts, there's doglegs right, there's short 4s, there's long 4s, there's short 5s, there's long 5s. It's got the complete package, and on top of that, the greens are just meticulously kept, but they've got fabulous runoffs around the greens which will really protect it. The protection it's a well bunkered golf course. I wouldn't say it's got the most bunkers on an open road course. It's certainly not Lytham.
Quite low, 60 bunkers ish.
But the runoffs and the shapes around the greens, one perfect example, anything left short of 1 disappears. Anything left of 2, short of 2, disappears. 3, a volcano green. 4 is protected inside a big bowl of sandhills. 5, if you go long, you're in the ocean. 6, the hole that Harry Colt, when he was asked if he'd like to name a hole after himself, he chose 6, Harry Colt's hole. The fabulous green structure with a little pokey out back. And if you're short, it'll drop off. If you're left, it'll drop off.
It's a huge green, but it's actually exceptionally small because of the runoffs.
Yeah.
Which I think is a character with a lot of the green sites. I agree. They each have a different complexion, a different character to them. The result is one where it asks a very different challenge of the golfer.
I think that the job doesn't get any easier when you approach the back nine. Something that you've looked up is the way that the course is routed, not dissimilar kind of rotating fashion to the way that Muirfield is routed. Also, Harry Colt, and the way that it rotates around the compass and makes you face every different type of wind as you go around.
I think if you look at courses like Troon would be a good example of this, perhaps. You know, these ancient links where they were kind of built in a roughly out and back fashion. Part of the product of bringing in Harry Colt in the 20s, Colt would have been at the peak of his powers by then. You know, he's kind of achieved everything. They gave him full license to redevelop the 36 holes at Portrush. He would have looked at that and approached it as essentially a blank canvas of work, so he didn't need to be too wedded to what was there. That means that he could build a layout and a routing that's a lot more golden age. You know, back in those times, building golf courses, 2 tee starts would be more common, and bringing people back to the clubhouse and moving the routing around rather than that kind of ancient way of going out and back. I think that's kind of, and the result therefore is one where you can play to each of the different points on the compass. I think Royal St George's does this, like that's a really key defining character of the course. You never settle on a wind direction, you're always moving in a different direction, which, you know, particularly when you're talking about the best golfers in the world, that totally sets it apart. There is another little thing on the routing though that I think is quite cool. There's different points in the round and different pieces of the landscape, but when you get to that far edge by White Rocks, by Harry Colt's, you know, 5 and 6, That's clearly exceptional land. You look at 15 and 16, both exceptional pieces of land. What he does is he kind of, the course goes out to these massive, massive high points and then comes around arguably some of the quieter, flatter pieces of the land and uses those well, but you don't stay within them for a long stretch.
What's interesting is Harry Colt, you know, as with all the really good ancient Golden Age architects, they use green sites. They pick green sites really well. And if you look at it from above, there is an area that is replete with greens. So if you think about 4th green, 6th green, 10th green, 8th green, they're probably 150 yards apart. And those green sites are all sat in little sand hills, this little spine of sand that sits up through the kind of middle section of the course, and there's lots of green sites packed in there. But you never really know. You don't know when you're playing them because of the size of the dunes around you. And that size of the dunes around you also complicates matters for the players, because whilst they're moving their way around the golf course and playing in different winds, you don't necessarily always feel it because you're a little bit down on everything that's around you.
I'd look at 10s like quite a good example of that. That little sort of half pipe that Shane Lowry hit that great shot into, I think, on the Saturday. That's just the most amazing green. You don't see a huge amount of that, and then you get down, you're in it, and you're like, oh wow, cool, I've seen that marker post dotted around the course. You look at, yeah, like you say, you look at 13 and 17, just that bowl with 2 greens that are just brilliantly natural, that just sit within there. I think Calamity kind of gets a huge amount of attention because it's a long par 3 over an enormous ravine. Of all the greens, it's the most benign for obvious reasons, because it's such a demanding shot to hit. Yeah.
One of the few bunkerless, if not the only bunkerless green on the whole course.
Well, it's pretty sparing with the hazards, isn't it, when you think about it? You know, 5 is a really good example. It's one of the, you know, of all the golf holes you could ever play, 5 would be, 5 is almost unbeatable as a golf hole, just for enjoyment, views, and the challenge as well. Like, it's a scoreable golf hole. And I think when you look at championships, opportunities for birdie and bogey and large variance in scoring is what makes a great championship. The idea that, you know, you can definitely make a 2-putt 3 these guys next week on the 5th, but you can also make a complete mess of it as well. And I think that's what makes it a great championship. And you look at the hazards on 5, there isn't that many. There's some gentle runoff that takes you right down into a low part. You've obviously got a very obvious hazard along the green, which isn't where you want to be. But you've got that tiny little knuckle that sits short of the green, just one simple mound, like a pimple, that almost underpins everything about where the ball ends up. And I think that thing with Portrush kind of goes on and on, like fairly simple, low number of hazards that have huge amount of consequence.
Yeah, and originally, obviously, there was a course change for the 2019 Open, brought in Mackenzie and Ebert. The old 17th and 18th made way for Spectator Village and infrastructure. That was sat in front of the clubhouse, which is now wonderful. It's the current course. It's a 6-hole junior course, really flat, where juniors can learn to play. But to find 2 extra holes, Martin put in a long 5. I think it's touching 600. It's 570, 180 something. And the 17th had a wonderful old bunker, Big Nelly, famous bunker.
Still there.
Still there. If you play the first on the Valley course, you turn around, it's there staring at you. It's huge. And Martin, as a nod to its history, reinstated that bunker on 7, on the right-hand side of 7, which is now on the drive of 7. So that kind of homage to Big Nelly on the right-hand side of 7. And I think there's going to be a few holes that just absolutely define the championship. 14 is going to be a really interesting. It's a long 4. It's 470. It's got this wicked volcano green that runs off left into a bunker, runs off back, it runs off right, and it runs off short. You're going to be playing long irons into, well, I mean, ordinary people would be playing long irons, but it's 470. They should still be playing mid to long irons into this brute of a par 4, and it isn't much green surface to aim at.
Well, there's a few, aren't there? Like there's tee shots like 9 where I still don't know how you hit the fairway. There's a lot of really uncomfortable drives I find at Portrush. very often, old links courses, you will have one very obvious side not to miss on and one side that is more accommodating, and they'll counter that a little bit with rough. I think Portrush is just naturally a very demanding course, tee to green. The drives, you very often drive into dogleg areas. 8, 9, 14 be good examples where you drive into a zone that is kind of on the dogleg. That's uncomfortable.
And there's a thickness to the rough where the length of these guys hit the ball, they're going to have to decide how much of the dogleg they're going to bite off, because there's no trees here, it's all rough. So you can challenge as much of that dogleg as you like, but if you're right and long, or if you're short and left, or however the dogleg plays and you're in the rough, it's highly unlikely you're going to be making pars from this to thick rough.
And the severity of the green complexes then mean that if you're playing at those from rough and you're not getting spin on the golf ball, you will just not be able to score as well. Like, you've got to be playing from tight grass where you can control the spin, you can control the flight and pick a target and stop it. It'll be really, really interesting. What are some of your favourite holes, Tom?
4th, Fred Daly's. New tee. It's taking it to 500 yards. It's a proper boundary hole. It is working on the principles of John Lowe and Stuart Patton. It's got the boundary all the way down the right, and then right in the driving range, you've got 2 big cavernous bunkers that sit perfectly where you want to put the ball. And you have to make a decision. Do you lay up short of that and accept you can have a long iron in to a green that's partially obstructed on the left in a bowl of sandhills? Or do you take it on down the right, which would be much more advantageous to the line that you get in? You can see the full green from the right. Or do you try and just bomb it over all of it? It's going to be... And if obviously the obvious hazard of going right is OB, left is rough death. It's a wonderful, wonderful, simple golf hole, renamed after the old caddy of Portrush, Fred Daly, when he won the Open in Hoylake in 1947. After that, it was renamed to Fred Daly's, but wonderful, wonderful golf hole.
I mean, 5 jumps off the page, and I've already talked about 5. I actually think the first is a really interesting golf hole. You know, it's not a gentle handshake. You've got out of bounds on both sides of the fairway, the kind of homage to the areas of the course that we used, I think, for horses back in the early years. And we saw people go out of bounds last year. I think you put that much consequence on the first tee with all the noise, with all the expectation on your shoulders. I think it's blockbuster stuff. And I think the green's amazing. Like, it's so easy to not get it far enough back onto there, to not hit enough club. You haven't settled yet on the wind. You can't feel the wind if it's into you. So you can't, because the green's perched up so far above your head. I think it's a real enigma of a golf hole. And I love the way the green just very gradually sort of moves back to front. I understand they've made some very subtle revisions to the front of that green, completely unnoticeable. But I think that's going to buy them a pin spot right on the front left, which I think they will use at some point.
Yeah, they've softened that runoff on the front to only you would never even know, but now gets them a pin front left, which is just the most horrid pin
because it will peel off on both sides of that. Yeah. If you play safe and you try and lag it, if that putt starts to feed a foot in the wrong direction, you could very quickly be pulling a 58 degree for your fourth shot.
Back 9.
I mean, there's a few, like 13, downhill par 3, very, very subtle golf hole. But because the green is pitched so far front to back, you know, just stopping it is actually quite a tricky shot. I love that part of the course. That's not the hole I'm going to pick.
Plays 191 as well. It's long. Yeah. It's a long 3 to have a green that runs away from you.
It's not the hole I'm going to pick. I can't not pick 15. It's one of the great half fours in golf. Portrush got several of them, but it is an exceptional hole. You drive, it's like that semi-blind drive up over the corner. Again, you're driving into a dogleg area. You can hit more club, you can hit less club, and you know you can wrestle with that decision depending on what the wind's doing. But ultimately, that green that's just perched up with nothing behind it, but a view out to the Skerries, and the penalty again for missing is so great, and yet it's all just short grass and mounding and contours that eject the ball in any direction. It's it's a very simple golf hole on paper, but when you've got a 2-shot lead and 4 holes to win the Open Championship, it's anything but.
Mine was going to be 15. 18 is a wonderful finishing hole. But I can't, it'd be remiss not to talk about Calamity. I mean, it's 236 yards. They did not play it from the back tee in the 2019 Open. It plays up to about 236 from the back. It was an iconic hole in the 51 Open, where Bobby Locke, South African Bobby Locke, famously bailed out every single day to a little dell that just short left of the green, and then got up and down every time for par all 4 days, and it became known as Bobby Locke's Hollow, which is kind of the blueprint for the way everybody should play that hole for the rest of time. If the wind is blowing, it's on almost the highest point of the course. The only thing higher is the 17th tee box, so it's the highest point in the course. The cavern between you and the green really cuts in. If you fade the ball, it is not a pleasant golf hole to play, because you have to set it basically down the 17th tee. If you draw the ball, it's not a pleasant golf hole to play, because you have to set it down a cavern and hope it comes back, and if it doesn't, it's down on the valley course. It's a monster, and it plays ever so slightly uphill. It's a little bit uphill for 236 yards, and it's a monster of a par 3 that I think all these players, I mean, Rory, famously in his Thursday round in 2019, 4-putted for a 5 and ultimately missed the cut by 1. It's a monster of a par 3 that can make or break your Open.
It would be remiss not to talk about 18. You know, I think we're used to Sundays at the Open where the 18th feels like a 400-yard victory lap sometimes. I don't know if that's it just when, you know, that's kind of the association with the 18th and an Open Championship venue. The 18th at Portrush is a seriously difficult golf hole.
Yeah, 470-yard dogleg ride.
You've got out of bounds left.
Out of bounds left. If you go through the fairway, you're out of bounds. That was where the horses that pulled the carts that cut the grass, they used to go graze in that little field, and it's been out of bounds ever since. 470-yard dogleg right. If you're right, you're in the sandhills, and you might not even have a view of the green.
You've got no view of the green, exactly. If you need 4 for the Open, that would be right up there in the list of holes I would not want to play. That would be right up there.
It's again a green which runs off front and runs off left. There's a little bit of feed in from the right and a little bit of feed in from the back, but left and short, no bueno.
Looking forward to it.